Hello everyone, my name is Joana Barbaran, I'm a civil engineer, and today in Ingenia we have a Julie Meredith. Hi Julie, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine.
Could you please make a brief presentation of yourself?
Yeah. My name is Julie Meredith, and I am a civil engineer for the Washington State Department of Transportation. I've worked in the industry for nearly 30 years, and I began working on the world's most intricate floating bridge across Lake Washington. That was one of my first jobs, to work in the design and management office of that project. And most recently, I worked on the world's longest floating bridge and led the construction of that. And I've had so many opportunities to work on big and small civil engineering projects in between. It's been a varied and interesting time.
Great, Julie, thank you. And how did you decide to study this career in the beginning?
My father worked in construction, and he was a cement finisher, and I would follow Dad around to all of his jobs. And I decided that I either wanted to be a scientist or build things. And when I went to school, I wanted to live in a remote area and work on difficult problems, probably in forestry. And when it turns out I live in the most populated area of Washington State and build projects in the most densely populated areas. So it doesn't always work out, but I did get to build big, complex projects, which I enjoy.
For sure. And how were your years in college? What would you highlight from your university years?
I think what I really enjoyed about the university years was exploring all the different avenues that are available to you when you're 20 years old and are trying to find your way forward. So I did study geology, I studied anthropology, I enjoyed the thought of being an art history major for a while. There was nothing I didn't try or explore, and I really loved that. In the end, I graduated in a small class with very few women, and decided to pursue civil engineering as a long-term career. And I think that at the time there were very few women that were doing that, and I'm very lucky at the Washington State Department of Transportation that we've had a few strong women leading the agency who gave women an opportunity and mentored us through the process.
Yeah, of course. I think we as a society need more of those kind of opportunities for women, you know?
Yeah.
And what challenges you had to overcome while studying civil engineering?
When studying civil engineering, there were very few women who were in class with us. It was hard to connect and have friends within the departments. I explored, going to school in different schools, and I ended up transferring from one school to another, so that was difficult. There were no professors that were women at the time, so it was really difficult to sort of connect with the professors. And I went to the University of Washington, which was a huge school at the time, and I explored forestry. That's where I got a lot of my classes, and I thought I was going to work in the field and do a lot of field work. Here in Washington State, forestry and forest management was a big part of our economy. And right after I graduated from the university, that part of our economy went completely flat, and I have been working in the highway side of civil engineering ever since then. But the challenges have been there are just very few women to connect with. And so you're often the only woman in the room, and you feel you must represent when you're there.
Exactly.
People.
Of course. And when you finished university, what work field did you start your career with? You already said that you were working in the transportation sector. Is that where you started and you stayed?
That is where I started, and I thought that I would only stay while the work was interesting, while there was something new and different to do.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I finished a project, I would say they just couldn't give me a better project, and a better one would come along. Like I said, it's been a varied journey, but I have been fortunate, and I encourage women all over to take on something that you don't think you could do, because you'll surprise yourself in the end. So every job has been a challenge where you wonder if you can do it, and it's been a great journey, and I have learned something new on each project I've taken on.
Great, Julie. So it was kind of a deal with yourself to stay while things are interesting, and you're still in the industry. You know, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's still interesting.
Okay, so what would you say about your daily routine right now? I mean, how does your schedule looks like?
Well, the daily routine, as with many people, has been sort of upended by COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the people here are, if they can, they're working from their homes and they're working online. So I've been doing that ever since March, working from my home where possible. So I spend a lot of time in my office here, and I spend most of the day in meetings on Zoom or Teams, and it can go, the days sort of run from early morning to late at night as you try to keep things moving from a remote location, and I'm really surprised that's still been possible, and I'm not sure it would have been possible even 5 years ago. But now with the technology, we've been able to sort of come together remotely and continue to make progress. I think today I work on projects. Most of them have some sort of technology. They all have some very interesting technical engineering component, whether it's been tunneling or floating bridges, where portions of it are actually built on tribal lands, where you need special permissions or agreements with tribal group in order to move forward. So I feel really lucky to have a varied portfolio to work on and some of the best teams in the world to do it with.
Mm-hmm. Great. And as you mentioned, when you have to deal with specific projects that may need some permits, you also have to work or to find a way to work with other specialties, and you need to find a way to communicate effectively with them. And I think that's something really interesting, because some people may think that engineering is just, to do some calculations and being in the office, but it's quite more than that. You need to develop yourself as an integral person in order to fulfill your job in an appropriate manner, right?
Some of the best guidance I got early in my career was a huge portion of our job is to communicate, to be able to communicate the technical aspects to people who perhaps don't have a technical background, but you also have to do interdisciplinary communication, like you said, to environmental groups, to regular citizens, to elected officials. We work with our interdisciplinary teams on a regular, I'd say daily basis, and that's the come together, everybody brings something to the table from their background. And I think one of the best advice I can give to a young engineer is to take communication classes. You've got to learn to speak, and you need to learn to write, and work with the people who do that, on a more daily basis than I do. I think that's really the cornerstone of good engineering, is being able to communicate.
Of course, soft skills are quite important, I think, for every professional. And Coming back to your work, what is the impact of your work in your society?
I think impact of working in transportation is that transportation touches everybody. It impacts the quality of life of all of the people in our state. I have worked on projects that replaced roadways that were unsafe and there were accidents, and by improving it, we made it a safer route for people to go to and from their home and their businesses, even replacing a signal so that people can cross the street who are hearing impaired and they can cross safely. You can have a huge impact on people's quality of life when you do a civil engineering project. We address water quality, we address noise, we address safety, we address connectivity. We have a huge focus now on intermodal transportation, so how do we work with the various transit groups to get people from one place to another, whether they're walking, biking, taking the bus, taking light rail. All of that affects people's quality of life in a very broad way, in an intimate way. So I think for me, that's what makes my job interesting and impactful, is how we can have a positive effect on each and every person we interact with.
Great, Julie, I totally agree with you on that. And what would you recommend to someone that is thinking about studying this career, or what would you tell your 17-year-old version of yourself?
Well, I think what you should tell every 17-year-old is you have to try. You have to be brave enough to try, and you have to be willing to fail. So you learn the most when things don't go right, or when you don't quite reach the goal. But unless you try, you'll never know. I wouldn't know how interesting geology was if I hadn't tried. I wouldn't know how great history was if I didn't explore that. So I think what I would tell a 17-year-old is try everything that you can. Explore the world. And on things that are difficult, then you know that nothing is achieved without working and doing hard work. And I'd say you got to put the work in. But it's a great reward in the end. It's really rewarding career.
Exactly. Thank you, Julie. And is there any statement that inspires you that you would like to share with us?
I think that what inspires me is working with other people who come from different backgrounds, and each person brings something so unique to the table. And what inspires me is how talented those people are. On my projects, I've got to work with engineers from around the world, and people are inspiring, and I think getting to work with people across various disciplines and talented people, there are so many of them, it really is encouraging, and that's uplifting for me to work with such talented people all over the world. It makes you feel like you can do anything.
Well, Julie, thank you very much for being here with me and sharing your experience with these people that are trying to understand more about engineering, more about their impact, and most importantly, that are trying to understand what is the role of a woman in engineering. Of course, there is a space for women in engineering. So thank you for being here, Julie. I appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you for making this happen.